Welcome to the IOGA Energy Speaks Pipeline Sports Show produced by SCTV for RSN Sports and Vibe National. It's game time across the mountains, so join us for all the in-depth analysis and predictions, fan interactions, and much more. The Pipeline Statewide Sports Show is sponsored by the Independent Oil and Gas Association of West Virginia, Thomas Health Systems, Little General Convenience Stores, Summit Orthopedics and Sports Medicine. From the heights of the Alleghenies to the banks of the Ohio, from Oak Glen to Bluefield, it's one state and one sports network. It's RSN Sports.
One thing about football season, when you start the journey, it's in the heat of summer, and the games start in August, practices sooner than that. But when you get to this point, and it's November football, the air turns cold, the night air is very crisp. That means it's usually playoff time or postseason time, and the games are very meaningful. And welcome to our IOGA Energy Speaks tailgate show in West Virginia, as we have playoff football tonight from Point Pleasant, West Virginia. Huntington High School versus Point Pleasant, Frank Gardenia, and the All-Pro Carl Lee, and the football queen Lisa Odie. And it is cold. There is certainly a nip in the air. Everyone's grabbing hot chocolate at the concession stand for good reason, because it's just nice to hang on to. But it's the time of the year when the games really are magnified. The importance of the game are magnified because it's win or go home. And Carl, there's a certain pressure, even at the high school level. There's a certain pressure when it's if you lose, you're done.
Yeah, there's nothing greater than making the playoffs, and nothing more disappointing is if you lose, especially starting out of the gate. This becomes a really high-pressure game for most anybody that plays in the playoffs. So it'll be interesting to see who can actually handle that.
Now, when you're at this point in the playoffs in West Virginia, it's the second round. So you've made the playoffs, you've won a game, you've had a good year. But if you lose tonight, how much does it hurt for the loser to feel like we didn't have a great year?
Well, and it's hard to kind of decipher. I know as a player, it's hard to kind of figure out, like, okay, we had a great season, we made the playoffs. Is that good enough? That's usually – you kind of go through that process and you're like, oh, no, we needed to win the championship. We needed to get all the way to the States. But sometimes it is just about getting there, and then at some point in time, maybe the next year you'll be able to do that. Now, as a senior or being in your last year, no, it's the worst thing ever.
Yeah, it's if you lose as a sophomore or junior, you think, well, we'll get back next year. Probably won't. But as a senior, it is tough. Dan Marino waited a long time to go back to that second Super Bowl, and guess what? It never happened for him while he was with the Dolphins. Football queen Lisa Odie with us. One thing about this matchup, too, Queen, is that these two schools are really not that far apart. Sometimes in the playoffs you have one end of the state against another. In every state you have that type of matchup. But these two schools are not that far apart. They're both in the same region of the state in Point Pleasant, Huntington.
Yeah, there are definitely some rivalry tendencies here because of the locations of both schools. The fact, too, that, Huntington they have a great record this year, and Point Pleasant's undefeated. That kind of throws into the mix. Also, the fact that I know we'll be talking about this later, but I know the SSAC has deemed Point Pleasant a reclassification from AAA to AA. And so, right now Huntington's still considered is a AAA school, so they have something to prove tonight. They can prove that they can hang with the big boys. So not only is it the location, but, it's just the fact that there's a lot at stake here between two teams.
That's a great point she's making. If you're Point Pleasant and you're going to AA next year, watch out, AA. But they'd like to leave AAA with the feeling, hey, listen, we proved we can play with the best in AAA, right, Carl?
Well, yeah, and I think they've had to live through this whole thing all season about schedule. They haven't really played anybody.
They've been hearing that all year.
Yeah, they've heard that all year. And so when you get to the playoffs, all of a sudden now you want to prove that. And I think this is a perfect kind of matchup because, again, it is a close rival, and it is a AAA team. Having that opportunity to play them here at their home place, going to AA next year, I think it's a big deal for them.
And both these teams very well coached. Excellent talent on both sides. A couple of verbal commitments, a couple of D1 prospects at Point Pleasant who've already verbal to play their college football at Marshall, which is, of course, in Huntington, home of Huntington High School. And as a result, if you're on the Huntington High side of it, you'd like to say, all right, let's go out and see how good these guys are. I mean, when you're playing against a guy that you know is a D1 commitment, does it get you a little, your juices flowing a little more?
Oh, absolutely. I can go all the way back to 1979. Kurt Warner being a single-A guy from Pineville, playing in the North-South game, everybody wanted to see, was this guy really real? You know, he's been playing single-A. We're triple-A guys. He has no idea of how good triple-A is. Came up, it clearly
didn't matter.
It did not matter.
Yeah. By the way, I saw a survey this week that listed the best running backs from every state in the country, and from West Virginia, I thought they won't get it right. They'll list somebody, but they listed Kurt. Do you agree with that?
I'm a little partial to Robert.
Right.
Coming out of high school, especially because, well, he went to South Charleston. I trailed him forever through.
And you don't even have to say his last name.
Yeah, Robert Alexander. Yeah.
You've made it when you go by one name, right?
I would have probably leaned toward him. And again, I'm probably going to be biased because I saw him as a kid all the way through.
Well, he was your guy.
Yeah, he was my guy. He really was. And Kurt, who became a great friend of mine, he was a really amazing running back. I felt like, when I looked at him run, he reminded me of Gale Sayers. And unfortunately, he had the knee injuries in the NFL, and that really slowed him.
Yeah, it's interesting when you do that type of survey or you do that type of list, you're always going to leave a lot of debate out there, and people are going to argue, and that's why they do that, so that they'll be interested and read about it and that they will argue. But I really think when I first saw the survey was being done, best running back in the history of the state of West Virginia, who would it be? My first instinct was Kurt Warner. And as good as Robert was, as good as Mike Tyson was, as good as others were, my first instinct was Kurt. And a little bit because of what happened in college and the pros. And he was so talented. But just like the best athlete, they did the same survey with the best athlete. And my reaction was Randy Moss.
Right.
And that's who they went with. But I think it was Sports Illustrated that did this. But most people in West Virginia complained because it wasn't Jerry West. And I can say that Jerry West is the most beloved athlete, but he wasn't Randy Moss. And I think Kurt Warner, if you go with him as a running back, it's a pretty strong pick. What do you guys think?
I don't think that you could go wrong with Kurt or Robert or Mike Tyson. I don't think
they just don't know who Tyson is.
Though. Yeah. A lot of people don't, and I think that hurts him. But again, I think you make the case. What Kurt was able to do at Penn State, what he was able to do in the pros, I think that piece of it outshines all those other guys. You got a Walter Easley who won a Super Bowl ring, but he wasn't the primary guy for the 49ers.
He was more of a fullback.
Yes.
I would have to lean toward Randy Moss. Probably not the most beloved, but one of the most talented all-around athletes to come out of the state would be Randy. Wouldn't you agree?
I think he is the best athlete.
Yeah, I would definitely.
I think if you're asking me who's the best athlete to come out of West Virginia, I think you're going with Randy Moss. As beloved as Jerry West is and was and still is as a basketball player, he's not the athlete that Randy Moss was.
Right.
Because when you start talking about athletes, you're talking about performance in all sports.
Right.
And clearly Randy was an exceptional athlete in every sport that he participated in, not just good, not even great. He was exceptional in literally every sport that he played.
Mm-hmm.
Playoffs in West Virginia, as we mentioned, this is probably the most intriguing matchup in many ways of this second round. It really starts getting tight in the semifinal round. There are other good games around. AAA, Capital and Martinsburg are playing tonight. This time a year ago, I might have thought that was the most intriguing matchup. Not sure this year. Martinsburg doesn't appear to be quite as good. Capital is good, maybe not quite as good as last year. Tough to be as good as they were last year, but that's another good game as well. How do you like Capital and Martinsburg?
My concern with Capital is I think in the beginning of the year, I really thought that they had the confidence to run through competition and not worry about it. They kind of got into this place that I think they questioned themselves, and I think a team that will challenge them, I think, has a chance to beat them. I think if you jump on them early, hit them, become physical as other teams have been able to do, I think they're in trouble. I think they're not walking with the swagger that I think they need to say that I could bank on them to go win a game.
So you're picking them to lose tonight to Martinsburg?
I don't know if I want to pick them to lose, but I think it's going to be how the flow of the game is going to be.
I think they're going to win, and it may not be that close.
And it could go that way. If they get out of the chute, it could go that way.
Right. And what you're saying about the swagger, I think they're getting it back. That with each playoff win, they're gaining that confidence and that swagger back. So, if they can come out with a win tonight, look for them to be in the Super Six. I believe that.
And I'll tell you this, man, we've got to take a break. I know on a cold, bitter night, the team I don't want to play is Capital Midland.
Exactly.
Because if it's cold and somebody's hitting you, that's two miserable things happening to
yeah,
you.
Exactly.
It's like going to Chicago.
That's right. That's right. When it's cold, I don't want to get hurt any more than I have to.
Exactly.
And Capital Midland they're not going to finesse you, but they are going to hit you.
Yeah.
And they're going to block you. And on a cold night, it's like, okay, that's enough. That's it for me. Where's the warm heaters? Let's take a break. Back with more after this.
For more than 200 years, guests have been coming to the Greenbrier to take the cool mountain breezes and experience authentic Southern hospitality. Today, that passion has been reinvented. The Greenbrier is the quintessential luxurious vacation. Book your stay today, and we'll create experiences that last a lifetime. Call 877-735-5068 or visit greenbrier.com.
Coach Bob Huggins here at your local Little General store. As I travel this great state, it's nice to know that almost anywhere I go, there's a local Little General nearby. So the next time you're on the road, look for the Little General sign and tell them Hugs sent you.
Welcome back to Point Pleasant, West Virginia, where the Point Pleasant Huntington High playoff game will kick off shortly. Second round of the playoffs in West Virginia. We were talking earlier about this matchup, but there are games across the state tonight and tomorrow. AAA, AA, and Single A. We mentioned AAA tonight. Another good one is Capital and Martinsburg. This one in particular, though, I think is probably the most intriguing matchup because Point Pleasant is a team that everyone has, not many people have really seen. They are undefeated. They've had very few close games, Carl, and a lot of people, though, are questioning the schedule. To me, if I'm Point Pleasant, that gives me more of a chip on the shoulder to prove people wrong also. Can that be the case?
Absolutely. Point Pleasant has had to hear all year long that they don't play anybody. And their schedule is weak, and they've only had like one challenge, I think, all season long. So I think for them, that's the motivation. They want to come out and prove that they're a good team. On the other side of that, I think when you're looking at Huntington, they've had 2 losses there. Capital, I think it was, and Capital Midland. So obviously 2 teams that are powerhouses that's beaten them. So that makes this game a really intriguing game because both of these teams are really pretty good, and we'll just see how it plays out.
I will say one thing, too, going undefeated in high school. I mean, the argument that they haven't played anybody goes out the window here.
I agree.
That's null and void.
I agree.
If you can accomplish the feat of taking your football team to 11-0 in the second round of the playoffs, regardless of who you play,
you're pretty good.
You're good.
Well, and then let's take that even a step further because of the fact they've only had 1 close game. So this is a team that will show up and will play every single down.
All right, Dana Farrell wants to jump in here too. Dana, go ahead.
I'm dying to tell you. When we looked at the matchups this week for RSN Sports, what game we were going to be at, there's a lot of great ones around the state, and we'll talk about those. But this one was intriguing for a lot of the reasons you've already pointed out. But when we looked at, like Carl just pointed out with Huntington, their 2 losses were to last year's state champion and the odds-on favorite to be the state champion this year. So that's their 2 losses. And then you have an undefeated team here at Point Pleasant. So when you look at those 2 factors, these teams, it was as intriguing matchup as possible. And I think you're right, Lisa. You can throw your records out the window. You come in here, it's playoff time. And Point Pleasant, and I think
when you mentioned that people question Point Pleasant's schedule, I don't think that's in a bad way. Everybody's just wondering how good are they. You know, they stomped all over Princeton. I think it was like 66-0 there to end up the season, and then come back and beat Musselman last week. So, I mean, they are holding up to the reputation so far.
This is not their first rodeo either. I mean, they went through the same situation last year in the playoffs. People said, well, they'll be one game and out because they haven't played anybody. They did very well in the playoffs last year.
Have a great back here that's a Kennedy Award finalist right now. We're being talked about that with Mitchell, and so there again we'll see how he matches up as he comes out against probably the fastest team, most athletic and deepest team that Point Pleasant's been to at this point. Because as you know, when you get to these playoffs, the further you go, the better the teams get.
I can remember coaching at West Virginia State and recruiting a young man born and raised out of here, John Bonecutter, small, quick, tough kid. People were like, I don't think he's going to be able to play in the conference. And I tell you what, when he showed up, work ethic, his ability clearly was above most of the people that were at that level.
What was the last name again? Bonecutter?
Bonecutter.
Are there many better, tougher names than that?
That's a perfect football name.
Oh, it's the perfect football name.
You couldn't ask for a better one. So, Bonecutter.
Yeah, we mentioned that's one. Yeah, when he plays at Ripley, you got Bonecutter in Death Valley over there.
Oh, that's perfect.
So, but these guys have been great. When we contacted them this week to be able to come up with the show, we just said, hey, this is where we want to be, and they rolled out the red carpet for us up here. And it's a great facility here.
Yes, it is.
You got
nice
the turf.
field.
And
Fairly new also, almost brand new. A whole new school and complex. Yeah, it's very nice. Well, I can remember Notre Dame a few years ago when they played West Virginia in the Fiesta Bowl when Major Harris was hurt. They had a linebacker named Stonebreaker, and I think that was the year. And I thought, man, I wouldn't want to block Stonebreaker.
Yeah.
I just wouldn't want to. I wouldn't want to mess with Bonecutter either.
No, and he was a tough kid too.
Lived up to his name.
I mean, let me tangle with a guy named Lee.
Yeah.
well, guys, there's also a lot of
You know all about his toughness.
You keep Stonebreaker and Bonecutter. I'll take Lee.
Well, guys, like I said, there were a lot of good matchups to pick from this week, and obviously this was a great one. But everybody, if you're in it, your matchup is the most important one tonight. And we look over to the other side of the bracket, single A. We carried a single A first-round playoff game on RSN Sports and NFHS Network last Friday night with St. Mary's and Buffalo that went right down to the last minute. A great game. You can actually go back and watch that on demand with rsnsports.com. But tonight, you look at the brackets over in single A, and you can look at we have them here.
Williamstown and Magnolia, right?
Yeah, right. Those two teams just do not like each other.
They're not far apart.
Not far apart. Carl and I drove through both towns on our way up to John Marshall a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
And they're just like this. A river towns right on the Ohio River, and not far apart. And they play for they go at it in basketball, football, doesn't matter the sport. I don't care if it's marbles, probably up there. They're after each other. And so Magnolia, number 1, Williamstown, I think, come in at a number 8 seed. So
and that's where you get to throw all those numbers out. Especially the closer teams are, the more the rivalry, the more the hatred between the two teams. I think you get a chance to throw all the rankings out and just go out and play ball.
Right.
And I think that's when you have a really, really good game.
Well, there's another one in the other side of that bracket in single A, Moorfield at number 4 seed against Tug Valley, number 12 seed. Tug's got to travel over to Moorfield.
Yeah, it's a long trip. Yeah.
It's a long haul. And so, but Moorfield's really been wreaking havoc over in that part of the state all season long. So, that's going to be a tough draw for the Panthers, Tug Valley, go over there. Then in the other, you got East Hardy. Another really good team in single weights. Had a good year over there with Wheeling Central visiting. So, and Central, just that tradition.
Yeah, Wheeling Central is the team in single A. You can't ever forget about them. No matter what the seeding is, the record, I mean.
They were down last year, but bounced right back.
They play a good schedule, and they get in the playoffs. They do very well.
And then finally, on the other side of that bracket, you have South Harrison, St. Mary's. And like we said, we had St. Mary's pulled out a close one against previously undefeated Buffalo last Friday night here on RSN. And so they advance on, and they're going to take on South Harrison, number 3 seed over there. So that should be an interesting matchup. You can watch the scores on all of those contests tonight on our network, rsnsports.com, on our score stream scoreboard. It's right on top of the page there. You can just watch them as the scores come in, and really up-to-the-minute scores all night.
The other thing about Williamstown Magnolia, you guys traveled that last week. When you go up that stretch of road, Route 2, I think that is, and you go to Williamstown and St. Mary's and Payton City and Sistersville, and when they had their own school in New Martinsville, Magnolia, I mean, when those teams were playing, you could rob a bank literally in those towns because the whole town was there. Those are still
Carl and I drove through Payton City, and there was a game going on as we drove back toward Charleston, and everybody seemed like they were at the football game that night. And Payton City's having a down year,
right,
but everybody was at the game.
See, these are places like this give you that community-based thing, and I love every time that we go and cover a game and we go to an area where you get community. Everybody's coming out. That's the best part of football in high school is seeing everybody in the community. Nobody cares about what's going on. Yeah,
right.
Nobody cares about what's going on anywhere else. They want to be right here. Doesn't matter about the weather.
Well, it goes two ways because I talked to Carl earlier in the week. I said, we could go. The weather, we'll have to watch that, and it's pretty cool. We could go in the studio this week, or we may go back over to one of our vendors. He's like, no, we're going to. I want to be out here. There's just something special about being out here with the people and the fans, and I think it's the other way around too. The fans, we had several requests. You need to come to our game this week. You need to come to our game, and it really is tough sometimes to make a choice, but we try to look at a lot of things, and hopefully we're trying to get around to see a little bit of everybody in different parts of the state.
Yeah,
so
what you're saying, I was just going to add to that I think in West Virginia there's just this support of high school athletics and our college athletics, the teams that play football in college, because we really don't have any professional teams here. And so I think people really, take to heart what they do have in the state, and they support it. And it's family, it's friends. It's just a tight knit kind of thing.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. The only thing, and I think we all kind of feel this when you're in the valley, it's a little different because kids are playing kind of almost everywhere. And I think still in other pockets of the state, smaller areas, kids want to play where they grew up.
Right.
And sometimes you get those kids who want to play where the best team is because they want to try to win a championship. Have at it, I guess. But for me, I like the idea of playing in my neighborhood and everybody wants to come and see that game. To me, that's the way football's supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you mentioned we don't have the pro teams and so forth. We don't have a ton of pro athletes or ex-pro athletes. I mean, we've had a few. We've had Moss and we've had Jason Williams and a few guys.
Let me qualify that statement.
A couple of guys.
They said there was one in town here tonight.
I did not say former
We're looking out for him.
professional athletes.
Queen, you're okay. Don't worry about it. I know the troublemaker in this deal.
I know. I'll take up for you for a little while.
I know.
You don't know where I was going with that. I mean,
we all know where you were going with that.
Guys, I have to step out for a minute. I'll be back next segment for Double A. We'll take a look at the brackets over there.
Okay, sounds good.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll also be talking a little bit later about reclassification in West Virginia. That's been a hot topic this week as schools are kind of moving from AAA to AA, from AA to single A, and vice versa. And we'll touch on it a little more next week. One of the reasons why this is such a hot topic, Carl, is everybody has their own agenda.
Yes.
Every school, every coach, every booster, everybody's got their own agenda with every sport as to why they do or don't want to be classified in this section or this level or whatever. And that's what makes this just a hot topic.
Yeah, because if every school may have one or two sports that are dominant in whatever classification that you're in. But then there's the other sport that may be struggling. All of a sudden, you put yourself either up or down into a really bad situation. And the argument's always going to be, if I'm a borderline AAA and go down to AA and dominate, is that where you want to be? Do you feel happy about that? Those are going to be kind of the questions for the teams that go down. If I was, as an athlete, I want to play up. I want to play against the best competition I possibly can. The motivation for a school, coach, maybe to win a state championship, and maybe I can't do that at a AAA level, so AA might work better for me. I don't know how that works, and we all know football drives that change for the most part. So we'll see how that plays out.
All right, we'll continue from Point Pleasant. Big game tonight, big night and weekend of football around the country and in the state of West Virginia. We're at Huntington High School versus Point Pleasant, round 2 of the playoffs here in West Virginia. Class AAA should be a great game. Back with more on a frigid night after this.
Complicated areas for any business is human resources, not to mention workers' compensation, payroll, and employee benefits. At ASI, we provide relief from the everyday burden of employment administration. ASI allows businesses to cost-effectively outsource the management of human resources, employee benefits, payroll, and workers' compensation. Free your business to concentrate on what's important, operation and revenue. We want to help your business. Log on to ASILLCWV.com and let our business help your business grow. ASI, business helping business.
Sports. The action is at Collectibles, etc. Sports, collectibles, and more are here. Over 100,000 items in a great location at the Nitro Marketplace. We are your WVU merchandise and apparel connection for men, women, and of course, kids. Mini helmets, full-size helmets, t-shirts, hats, blankets, and hoodies with your favorite sports team logo. We have it all for the sports enthusiast and for the whole family, too. Take the Cross Lanes exit and drive up to the Nitro Marketplace. Also find us online and on Facebook. There's never an off-season at Collectibles, etc.
Welcome back to the IOGA Energy Speaks tailgate show here from Point Pleasant. Frank Gardenia, Carl Lee, Lisa Odie, the football queen, with you on a very cold night as we do get ready for playoff football here. It's cold, but there's something about the playoffs that the atmosphere gets a little more tense. The football queen is with us, and even the queen looks a little tense here tonight.
This is football weather. Really, it is.
But here's the
it's
problem.
Playoff weather.
Here's the problem. Each
It's
time we
cold.
go into break, the queen has more clothes. She changes or adds something every time we go to break.
This is true.
She has, unlike us, she has an entourage.
Yes, no doubt.
She's got handlers. She's got a wardrobe department or something.
I got lucky.
Yeah,
I
she's
just got
got
lucky
all that.
What was available in the vehicle, I took it and I ran with it.
We have
fashion
none of that,
ensemble,
Carl.
Yeah,
I
there's
don't know.
nobody
It's warm.
bringing
It's
us
warmer.
extra stuff. Nobody's
No.
bringing us extra stuff.
Sorry for your luck.
The queen is great about getting that hot chocolate and getting her hands warm, and then she'll let you have some of it when it's cold.
I won't share the hot chocolate. I'll share the cold chocolate.
We got AA games tonight as well, Dana. What are we looking at? Hold on just 1 second.
Yeah, we got a big one up in the north central part of the state where number 1 Bridgeport is taking on rival RC Bird. And I'm not sure if the Bird Cage up there, that gang that go by, is up for it, but a rivalry situation go back.
Right.
You can throw out the records, and Bridgeport looking to repeat again on the AA title. And that's a team that it's been since they moved down from triple to AA, and we'll talk about reclassification coming up shortly. But it's a team that's definitely dominated in football, and they're looking to make a run back to the Wheeling Island Stadium this year. So they've got to get through rival RC Bird tonight.
And they will stay in AA in the reclassification. A lot of schools were kind of hoping, I think a lot of AA schools were hoping they might move up a little bit. But they will stay in AA, and this Point Pleasant program will be in AA next year. I mean, not trying to get ahead of myself, but looking ahead, oh boy, there's some potential great games.
Yeah, and we'll talk about it because AA really got shook up as much or more than anybody out of that reclassification that came out this week. We'll take a look at the other side of that bracket, Fairmont Senior and Kaiser matchup. Those two teams are a lot alike. I think in terms of style of play and their athletic abilities and things. So that should be an interesting. That's going to be close up there between those two teams. And
Fairmont Senior already has a championship in boys soccer, right? That surprised some people.
Oh, yes, and we'll talk about that shortly, too. And I was actually on the call of that game when they upset a big upset. Charleston Catholic in soccer was undefeated when going into that championship match against Fairmont Senior. And Fairmont Senior, the only loss they had was to Charleston Catholic, and they avenged that that evening or that afternoon down there on a very, very exciting match. So soccer, goes. It was, and you can there again. That's available free on demand on RSN Sports NFHS Network, so you can catch that on our website. But that's a 4 versus 5 up there on that football game this weekend. So big one there. Other side of the AA bracket, Bluefield and Mingo Central. Now, Mingo Central, it's in talking today, just what a great record Bluefield has there at Mitchell Stadium, and as Carl knows, I think that was one of the places that you played a playoff game at. Is that correct?
Well, no, that was my first playoff game to see. When South Charleston and
you were
Bluefield,
a ninth grader, right?
Yeah, yes, and South Charleston was playing Bluefield. It did not end well. Let's make that note. It did not end well.
Well, it depends on who you were. What your perspective. Bluefield people thought it ended very well.
Yeah, they thought it ended well. That's true.
Be careful.
I think that's going to be a game down there people are keeping an eye on because there was all the controversy about Mingo Central tossing the last game of the season so that they could get matched up in this bracket, and they'd be on the opposite bracket from Bridgeport, which they are. So, there's probably a lot of fans around the state that hoping we're going to be Beaver fans this weekend, trying to hope that Mingo Central gets knocked off after that. But, they're just playing for their best angles. I mean, you have to look at it.
I don't know how you do that though. I don't know how.
You just couldn't figure it out. I couldn't either. I couldn't look at it and say, well, if we do this, we'll be on this side of it. I mean, I couldn't tell myself, oh yeah, we'll go to Bluefield. That'll be easier than playing somebody else.
Yeah, and I think even if you tried to do it and try to link it to like an NFL team who's going to not start their quarterback and possibly could lose the game because of that's a different story, because they kind of already know where they are. But this is almost, to me, intentionally like giving a game away just so that you could have your best chance to get to a championship. The best way through a championship or to a championship is through the best competition.
So you got to beat number one.
Yeah, you got to beat number one at some point in time.
But now, regardless of the controversy, Mingo Central is a pretty doggone good football team, and we were down at Chapmanville, and Chapmanville was undefeated. Yeah. Central came in there, and that night, and Butch Mounts, our producer, and I stayed a little bit into that game, and they looked pretty good.
Well, Yogi Kinder's a heck of a coach. I mean, he's getting a lot of criticism for that, and he's a character, which our state, we kind of like characters.
That's right.
Coaching. but he's
we got him
look who's
characters welcome.
Well, we like characters. I mean, Sonny, you played for a character at Marshall.
Sonny Randall.
Yes,
people
I
like
did. Sonny.
Yes.
And Lou Romano, when he coached basketball at Charleston High back in the older days, Lou was a little bit of the aw shucks little Italian guy that was a bit of a character. And but Yogi, take all that over. Yogi's a heck of a football coach.
Well, Mingo Central rolled in that night. Chapmanville was 7-0 that night coming in Central. It was over with by the end of the first quarter, really, for all intents and purposes down there in Chapmanville. So they're a pretty good football team. So that's going to be an interesting matchup with a traditionally strong Bluefield team down there. Other side of that bracket, you've got Tulsa entertaining the Hoover Huskies. Huskies start playing very well here in the second half of the season. Got to travel over to Tulsa, which – that's a cell phone abyss over there, so you don't get much signal. We won't know much on that one until a little bit later. But I think that's an interesting matchup. Those two teams, definitely both in the Cardinal Conference, played a very tough game, I think, at Hoover earlier in the season. So that's one we'll definitely keep an eye in Double A. So Double A always very, very competitive. Expected, especially with reclassification. We'll talk about that in just a minute. It's going to be even more so moving forward because the teams that are in there.
I really can't see anybody beating Bridgeport in Double A this year. I don't want to ruin the suspense, but I mean they look to me to be.
They got to play them.
There you have it.
As Lisa says, though, you got to throw the records out. You got to play them. So we'll see.
And it's all because of the stick eye.
So you love the stick eye. So
I just like to say it.
He says it every week.
Yeah, every week.
The stick eye.
Every week there's a show.
We're talking
Bone
Cutter, Death Valley, stick eye.
He will find a way to get the stick eye in there some kind of way.
Well, it's a tough, cold night. I mean, we talked about bone cutters and stone breakers and things that are tough. I mean, what could be tougher than having a stick in your eye? When I think and when you think of Bridgeport, you think of that. So it has been an interesting last part of this week in terms of high school sports in West Virginia, talking about reclassification. And again, there's no easy way to do it. There's no perfect way to do it. And we'll come back and get some thoughts and give on all of these subjects and more when we come back in just a moment.
For more than 200 years, guests have been coming to the Greenbrier to take the cool mountain breezes and experience authentic Southern hospitality. Today, that passion has been reinvented. The Greenbrier is the quintessential luxurious vacation. Book your stay today, and we'll create experiences that last a lifetime. Call 877-735-5068 or visit greenbrier.com.
Coach Bob Huggins here at your local Little General store. As I travel this great state, it's nice to know that almost anywhere I go, there's a local Little General nearby. So the next time you're on the road, look for the Little General sign and tell them Hugs sent you.
Little boys over said, well, who y'all rooting for? And that kid said, not you.
That's funny. Move.
All right, we got fans here. We got a lot of people are commenting about this reclassification thing. That's been a hot topic all week. So,
and we were talking, Daniel, when you were not on the set with us. One of the reasons why there's no easy way to do it is everybody has their own agenda. Every coach. I mean, you coach volleyball. If you're a soccer coach or a cross country coach or a tennis coach or softball. I mean, for example, if I'm the Hurricane softball coach and you tell me that Lincoln County is moving from AAA to AA, I'm saying great, because they've struggled in most sports, but they're good in softball. And those two teams knock each other out in the section.
We mentioned before we went on air, it affects football, obviously, but it affects all the sports. And as you mentioned, it doesn't matter if the Olympic sports, baseball, basketball, but football, it matters a lot because of the point system that they have in order to get in these playoffs.
And a lot of schedules will change now. I understand that two schools that are moving down from AAA to AA, Winfield and Nitro, have already been released from their schedules for next year. But I'm sure that Winfield is still going to play Hurricane, for example, and Nitro is still going to play a lot of teams around the Kanawha Valley because they've done that for a while. But let's talk about Winfield Nitro moving from AAA to AA. Winfield's been AA, AAA, back to AA. Nitro, this is a new thing for them to go down to AA.
Yeah, Nitro had talked a little bit and made some overtures last year that they really wanted out of the MSAC because they were just having trouble competing over there at that time. The football team especially was down. So, this is going to give them that ticket out without having to pay any kind of fines or any kind of issue with the MSAC. So, big help to them.
I think Nitro is one of the classic examples of kids not going there to play, that live there and want to go somewhere else to play. Whether it's the history I should say maybe recent history, it seems like they're not winning, so I don't want to play there. So I'm going to go somewhere
baseball.
else. Yeah,
baseball, they want to be there.
Well, yeah, baseball, baseball,
For
baseball,
sure.
they want to be there. Football, they don't necessarily. So your football athletes are trying to get somewhere else, and to me that becomes part of the problem when it's driven by football, and football tends to be that one sport that, well, I can't say that. I was going to say that football is the sport that everybody wants to jump to try to win, but baseball in Nitro is a place that everybody will migrate to.
In baseball, I mean, the two best regions in the state that have been regarded the last years have been the Eastern Panhandle and then Western West Virginia down in what's called Region 4 with Calvin Midland and Huntington High and Hurricane and some of those teams. And now you've got Nitro and Logan from that region dropping down to AA. All of a sudden, that AA baseball state tournament gets a little more juice.
Yeah, a lot of people talked about that this week because, you pick up Logan, Nitro, Winfield, all strong baseball programs are now going to be coming in there and joining some other strong baseball programs already in AA. So Bridgeport, obviously two-time defending champion there. So that's going to be tough. In AA, we said of the reclassifications, AA probably had the biggest effect or had the biggest change what happens there in all the sports.
It's almost like you could call it, rather than a reclassification, more of a downsizing, because there was really nothing more than AAA moving down to AA status. There was only like one team, I think, that actually went up a class, and that was Man. They went from single A to double A.
Single to AA.
But that's the only
and I feel bad
that
for
you
him.
saw
You didn't see that coming.
in that direction.
Yeah.
And that is really a good point, because you just dumped everybody kind of down into AA, and again, only one coming up to AAA. and then there could be question even how that will work out for them.
Well, there are now only, I think, 29 AAA schools,
Right.
16 in football make the playoffs. Carl, let's go back to your point you touched on earlier. If you're coaching, would you rather, if you're a small AAA school, would you rather be playing AAAs, if you're Bryce Castro Nitro, or would you rather be AA? Personally, I would rather be AA where I have a chance to compete. But if I've got J.R. House like they had 15 years ago, that'd be different.
Yes, I think as a coach, I think you have to evaluate that team. And I think Nitro is a perfect candidate to move down. You know, South Charleston, one of the third smallest AAA, no way they would want to go down, you know, because they just feel like they're bringing in athletes and they're able to compete. So, again, you talk about coaches have a motive, they have an idea, they understand where they are. I think there are coaches, though, that will say, hey, we can compete in AAA, but, man, if we could get down to AA, we could probably really run the table. And I don't know if that's really fair or not, you know, but I don't know. I mean, it's going to be an interesting piece here.
Yeah, a lot of it has to do with the football program, like I said, because there's so much money. You know, it's the cash cow of all the sports, and so you know, you have a good year, and in football, you can drive in some, good, you know, get a couple good gates, especially early on. It's a lot of money, and we're talking not just thousands, maybe tens of thousands of dollars in gate money.
Well, that's why Winfield and Hurricane probably still have to play, don't they? I mean, one's going to be AA and one's AAA. If you're the AAA team, it could hurt your ranking, but that's a great gate every year. How do you give that up?
Right, but it does create some other good matches. Nitro and Poco's a great natural rivalry that now is legitimate. They can play each other without one team have to complain about loss of points and those kinds of things. So that creates some good matchups and upsides there too. So you see that. We mentioned something earlier about playoff and points with football. Think about it in AAA with 29 teams, 16 are going to make playoffs. So there's a lot of questions this week about should they look at maybe dropping down to 8 teams in AAA. But, is the SSAC going to do that? Because they're, again, talking money. It's a lot of money lost out of there if they drop, at least 4 play-in games. So, that's you got the possibility, somebody said, of a 4-6 team, at least a 5-5 making AAA playoffs.
That's crazy. We're already there in college.
Right.
We've got college teams
Yes.
in bowl games that I just hate the idea of a 500 team having a shot in the bowl. And we all know that's driven solely by money, not by really games that matter.
No.
Well, if you win a state championship, if you're a traditional AAA team and you win a AA state championship, or if you're a AA team, Queen, and you win a single A state championship, do you feel like, well, we won a lesser championship, or do you still feel like, hey, we won a state championship? Who cares?
No, I think they'll still appreciate the championship regardless of what class you're in, because it's a process to get there. You have to do well during your season, regular season. Then you get to the playoffs. You have to win out to get to the championship game. So they're still going to appreciate the fact if they're a state champion, but I think with the former alumni and the fans that remembered when they were AAA rather than a AA school, it may take a little away for them.
Let me challenge you two on that.
I agree with the Queen, by the way.
I knew that. That's not a shock.
Well,
let's assume that you're a junior this year, and then you move down to AA, and you didn't win a state championship at AAA. Are you still happy going down to AA, realizing that you're going down to a lesser, quote, lesser talent? You're still happy.
Be careful there, Carl.
Here's an example.
Okay.
Here's an example. First of all, it's 2 against 1. So, take the old East Bank High School, who was a AAA power in the 60s, won 2 or 3 championships in the 70s, in 71 and 73. In the 90s, they had dropped down to a AA school, and they won about, 6 or 7 state titles. They still felt pretty good about that.
But that's a different group. That's a different group. I'm saying I shouldn't really use you, but maybe I'll talk to Queen on this. Let's assume, Queen, that you were a junior, and you did win a state championship in AAA, and then you were forced to move down to AA. Would you be satisfied on the AA saying that you won the AA state championship.
I would just say I won a state championship.
Yeah,
You would say
No,
that if
I know
you
where
won
Carl's
a
going.
trophy.
I would say, Coach, they both would be. I coached on AAA and AA, and they're both exciting. You're there. Just like you said, you're playing to win, and it's exciting. You're there. But when you back up from it, a couple of years back, whatever, which one? Yeah, okay, yeah, you won in AAA, the big daddy of them all, yeah. That's probably the one you're going to put on the top of the trophy shelf.
I'll go with that.
But your argument could be, if we're looking at this scenario, you had to go through 44 of the best teams in the state rather than 29.
I can give you that.
That's right. And it comes back to what we said about the Kennedy Award. You can only compete with the students you have, and if you only have 500 students in your building compared to 1,500, you won a state championship with that, knowing that you were up against some bigger. Right. You may be more proud of that.
And let me just say this: you are talking to a non-athlete here, as you know.
Clearly, I know.
I'm one of the few guys. I'm one of the few guys that competed in a sport in high school. I went out for the sport strictly because they didn't cut anybody cross country. And you know what? I still got cut. Halfway through the season, they told me, you don't need to come back out here anymore. You might kill yourself.
I can believe that.
I got cut from a sport that don't even cut people.
Oh, Frank.
Well, I know we have to take a break, but real quick, these are the teams from AAA that dropped. That was Lincoln County, which we were over there.
I think that's a great opportunity to compete.
For Lincoln County, that's a good move for them, for sure. We were over there earlier with our tour,
right.
And then we had Lincoln County, Logan, which they've been there. They were double before. They bounced around a little bit, but they've been down, especially with football. So it'll be a good move for them. As you mentioned, Winfield and Nitro, Oak Hill, which has struggled with some football, so that could be a good move there. But Oak Hill and Shady Spring, I thought were interesting because they're down there for a while. When you had Woodrow and Greenbrier East and Princeton drop out of the MSAC, they had that group down there. They in AAA, they could play each other around robin schedule, could fill out their schedules pretty good. But that's not going to be the case now with those two teams dropping to AA.
Well, the other thing that changes too, Dan, that we haven't talked about much is like basketball sectionals. Like
Absolutely.
That area, Woodrow and Oak Hill and those teams have been in the same section. Now they're in different classes.
Right, and so Elkins was the other AAA team that dropped to AA over there in the mountain region. And then, of course, right here where we're at, Point Pleasant will drop to AA. So they're probably a prospect to look at for joining the Cardinal Conference. But as one coach mentioned today, if you're not winning, you're not, especially in football, a lot of games, you don't have any problem getting games. But if you're a good team like Point Pleasant, you need to be in a conference because nobody else schedule you.
Yeah, and what's going to be really interesting with Point Pleasant, because Point Pleasant is that school that most AAA teams that are away from here, they don't really respect them because they don't really play. And I think what's going to be really good for them, winning here, if they're able to win, go make a run through AAA, and then when they go down to AA, I think that they'll end up being an absolute power. And I think it's going to be very difficult for people to beat them.
The other school that I thought of when I saw the reclassification, I think I saw it correctly, Ravenswood, I think, has moved to single A, right? And they are the largest single A school in the state. That's significant in single A.
Right. Ravenswood, though, in a conference situation, doesn't affect because they're in the LKC, which has double and single A schools, so that shouldn't affect. Ritchie County was another double A that dropped to single A, but they're in the LKC, so that shouldn't be an issue. My thought on that were you look at in that LKC where you have a split of double and single A. Now you got a disproportionate balance of single A schools. So Rome counties, the Clay counties, and schools that are still double A, you got to think, do we stay in here because we can't play a round robin here in football. Even if you have a winning record, you can't advance. So it's a lot of things to think about with this. It's certainly going to be a lot of discussion.
It's been a hot topic across the state. It will continue to be so. And every few years when they reclassify, it'll continue to be a hot topic. But tonight it's all about playoffs, and this weekend it's all about playoffs. And this is a huge AAA game where we are tonight, Point Pleasant and Huntington. Back with more after this.
complicated areas for any business is human resources, not to mention workers' compensation, payroll, and employee benefits. At ASI, we provide relief from the everyday burden of employment administration. ASI allows businesses to cost-effectively outsource the management of human resources, employee benefits, payroll, and workers' compensation. Free your business to concentrate on what's important, operation and revenue. We want to help your business. Log on to ASILLCWV.com and let our business help your business grow. ASI, business helping business.
Winner, winner, chicken dinner.
Everything sports. The action is at Collectibles, etc. Sports collectibles and more are here. Over 100,000 items in a great location at the Nitro Marketplace. We are your WVU merchandise and apparel connection for men, women, and of course, kids. Mini helmets, full-size helmets, t-shirts, hats, blankets, and hoodies with your favorite sports team logo. We have it all for the sports enthusiast and for the whole family, too. Take the Cross Lanes exit and drive up to the Nitro Marketplace. Also find us online and on Facebook. There's never an off-season at Collectibles, etc.
And we're back.
The IOGA Energy Speaks tailgate show, Frank Gardenia and the All-Pro Carl Lee and the football queen Lisa Odie. It's cold here as we're at Point Pleasant tonight for Point Pleasant Huntington High playoff game. Carl, you were a Viking, but you were a Metrodome Viking, weren't you? Did you play outside the old Met Stadium?
That's the justification. That's what you like to use against me. But we practiced outside.
Well,
we played Chicago and Green Bay. We played all those folks outside.
Yeah, that conference you were in, that's pretty tough.
As you notice, like I have my hands exposed. You know, Bud didn't let you wear gloves, so I'm just used to that. I'm just toughing it out.
Well, I mean, those old Vikings, Carl Kasolke, and Shirachman and all those guys, I mean, I'm not saying they were tougher than you because they played at Tiger Stadium and on the road and Lambeau and played in the freezing cold in Minneapolis. I'm not saying they were tougher. Did you get that?
It feels that way, though. Let's just say it feels like you're saying that.
I will say this, when I glance over at Carl when I'm over here, like, you know, trying to adjust my gloves and trying not to shake on the air, and I'm kind of like cold. And Carl's over there in, like, tennis shoes? Are there socks?
No socks.
No socks. Okay.
I'm going no socks too, but I'm getting credit for that.
And he has like just a little fleece pullover, no gloves. So I mean, you look like you're okay with it.
Bud's whole deal was you could not appear to be cold because if you appeared to be cold, because we wanted the opponent to be cold, you know.
Right.
So I just kind of some way adopted that. So now I just try to just hang
I've
in
got to
there.
go with
I'm
Lisa.
cold.
I've got to go with Lisa. You know what? I don't care what they think. I'm going to stay warm.
I'm just cold. I'm sorry.
But I say that because a couple of years ago, probably the coldest place we ever do a broadcast from is Beckley for the state soccer championships. It's always the first or second weekend of November, and it's up on top that YMCA complex up here. I call it the Tundra. And no press box on the double A field, so we're out in the elements like this, and the wind was blowing. It's usually snowing, and you're just I'm trying not to shiver, so I won't be breaking up on the quiver on the air. It's just that bad.
One of the stories coming out of the state soccer championships, Dana, that nobody's talked about that much. Morgantown boys winning in AAA, and the star player, and I think the player of the year was the son of the former athletic director at West Virginia, Oliver Luck. His son was an outstanding player, correct?
Yeah, Addison Luck, yes, and did a great job down there as he did all season. And, of course, I seen a tweet later on. He was saying, congratulating his teammates and talking about those guys. And so you can see a lot like his dad. And, great soccer tournament down there. And those guys do, as cold as it is, they do a great job down in Beckley hosting that. And there's not many places where you have two full regulation soccer fields side by side like that. One of them, they just turfed this year, and I told him, I said, okay, if you can afford turf, you can afford a press box next year. We're hoping for that.
Exactly.
But they were great contests. I was on the double A field, and Charleston Catholic girls completed a great season, just mowed right through Pikeview for the championship. I think it was 9-1 in that championship match.
How big a story are the Winfield girls in AAA winning 4 championships in a row?
And amazing. And there's a school going to double A, so you can see them, and they're getting in that bracket with Charleston Catholic and Sissonville and some of those perennial soccer powers in girls soccer. So that should that's going to be make some interesting twists in that sport.
Yeah, if I'm the coach at Sissonville or Charleston Catholic, my lunch just got ruined today. Seeing Winfield's doing what?
That's right. So, but they like to play good competition. So they don't, But congratulations to those that in soccer boys. It was Morgantown. In the girls, it was Winfield, as you said. Fairmont Senior in the boys defeating Charleston Catholic, and then Charleston Catholic girls defeating Pikeview down there. That was a couple weeks ago. And then last weekend we're in the Civic Center for volleyball. It was nice and warm in there, guys.
Climate controlled.
It's climate controlled. And some great matches there. We called those. The first match in championships last Saturday morning was that was come back to that. Work County over Magnolia in a 3-2 contest. 3 games to win into the 5th and final game, and that was close. It was a very good contest there. GW, same thing, took 5 games, but they upset last year, or 2-time reigning champion Musselman in that sport. It's dominant there, so that was a great contest. And then earlier in the morning, it was Philip Barber, a 3-0 decision over Oak Glen, so both perennial powerhouses. So great. There again, you can go back and watch those matches on rsnsports.com. They're there free on demand. But tonight, we're here in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, the quarterfinals of the state football playoffs, ready to get underway across the state tonight, tomorrow night.
And I think it gets pretty serious right now because the first round, you've got your 1 versus 16 and 2 versus 15. Carl, the first round, you may get some games that are not that close.
Right.
At this point, everything gets to be pretty tight.
Yeah, this is where things start to narrow down, and it becomes really the matchup. It becomes the strategic piece of the matchup. You've got teams who love to throw the ball this time of year. Hands are cold, can't throw the ball. All of a sudden, that advantage that they had during the regular season now is gone because now that team that can run the ball, pound you all day long, that changes it. So all of those kind of things now matter in the playoffs that didn't matter in the beginning of the season.
Queen, by the way, the football queen, Lisa Odie, with us, she's a Green Bay Packer fan, so she likes cold weather teams.
To watch them.
In front of her television,
All right. I got to give it to you, though. Some of the coldest football games as a fan because you're sitting there.
But she has been to Lambeau, I will say. But
it was a nice weather day. We got really lucky. It was in October, and it was like 53. That's like summertime in Green Bay.
So you have not been to Lambeau.
I guess you could qualify it. I guess we can do that.
Teams are kind of built sometimes for where they play. I mean, you'll hear people say, well, so-and-so would not be a good player for the Browns in Cleveland because it's going to be cold weather the second half of the season. Right. Same thing in Green Bay. I mean, the Packers have tried to build their team for their weather in some ways, haven't they, over the years?
I think so. I mean, just, the fact that they play outdoors, most all year round when they're at home. The teams that they play, they're all basically in that northern part of the country. When they get lucky, they go to Jacksonville or Charlotte or somewhere like that where it's warm, and they probably burn up just because they're accustomed.
And usually you have to leave a day or so early just to get acclimated to the weather because you're so used to being cold. And in playoffs, we went down to Charlotte one year and practiced before we went to San Francisco. We went to California early just to practice because you can't duplicate that. Yeah. And for teams that's got to come to Lambeau and places like that, there's no way to duplicate that.
It's a whole lot easier for a cold weather team to acclimate to the warmer weather than vice versa.
Well, there's a reason why the Packers had guys like Nitschke, and Lombardi, and Horning and Taylor. And the Dome Vikings had guys like Lee.
Oh no!
There we go.
Well,
I knew that was working its way around.
Players, we had to take a look at who you're going to take on this contest here. I'm looking at with Point.
I'm taking Point Pleasant.
They've got Mitchell, and they're looking at Kennedy, candidate, and he's had a great year. Yeah, so I think they're at home. It's a cold night. They can just hand him the ball and just go at it.
I think Point's going to live up to their record. I think being undefeated, and I think the fact that no one has given them their just due. I think they come out and
chip on their shoulder
and win. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that they'll win this game.
So that's the first time I think we've all agreed.
Did you make a pick, Queen?
Oh well, I do agree though. I mean, I feel like they have too many motivating factors tonight to pick against them. I think it would be for me, it would be a really surprising thing to see them lose.
I'll say this, though. Huntington High, Billy Seals, well coached.
They're good.
Absolutely.
The job he's done there every year, they're better and better. He's gotten the program to the point now where he just kind of replaces people and moves on. He's done a heck of a job at Huntington High.
The change here in the weather, I think also, again, changes how the strategy works. And when you can run the football, I think you lead. It gives you an advantage if you can run the football and you run it well. Having athletes, I think as Huntington does, that's a good thing. But I think the power and being able to run the ball, I think
right, and you may
that.
mention one thing. Turnovers could be a key to either team.
Yes.
Right.
But I will make note of this as we get ready to wind down that obviously if you're watching us live tonight with the show, that you can tune over to WRVC out of Huntington. Will be live stream audio on the radio, so you can watch that off their website. So if you want to follow the game live, you can do that with WRVC and keep track of it. And, of course, we have our ScoreStream scoreboard on the website across the top of the page, and at the very bottom is the master scoreboard. Up to the moment, scores on there all night long as the playoff results come in across the state.
And it should be a fun night. Thanks for being with us. That should do it for us from here. There are great games everywhere, so wherever you are, enjoy the games and enjoy your football weekend.
Welcome to the IOGA Energy Speaks Pipeline Sports Show, produced by SCTV for RSN Sports and Vipe National. It's game time across the mountains, so join us for all the in-depth analysis and predictions, fan interactions, and much more. The Pipeline Statewide Sports Show is sponsored by the Independent Oil and Gas Association of West Virginia, Thomas Health Systems, Little General Convenience Stores, Summit Orthopedics and Sports Medicine. From the heights of the Alleghenies to the banks of the Ohio, from Oak Glen to Bluefield, it's one state and one sports network. It's RSN Sports.